Welcome to This Pause For You podcast, celebrating service, therapy, and working dogs, and how they save lives every day. Join us as we get to know the dogs and their handlers. Be sure you're subscribed. This Pause For You podcast is brought to you in part by Springer Education Entertainment, Anchor Productions, and Dogs on Duty, the Dog U Series. Find out more about that one at thedoguseries.com. Now your host, Refreshing Ron Springer.
Thank you, Epic Voice Guy, John Bailey. Welcome to This Pause For You podcast. Today, we're joined by Carol Edwards, Executive Director of Early Alert Canines. We're going to learn about diabetic alert dogs. So, Carol, why don't you just get going here? Let's just jump in. So what got you started and how did EAC come about?
Well, it was many, many years ago that I started puppy raising for Guide Dogs for the Blind out of San Rafael, California. And that's really where I got my start into the service dog world. I raised 17 dogs for them over the time that I was there and really improved my dog training skills. At the end of that tenure, the very last dog that I had actually went on a field trip with a friend of mine who was a type 1 diabetic to New York City, and he ended up saving his life in the middle of the night, waking him up because he was having a severe low blood sugar reaction. When he returned home, he shared this news with me, and this was a dog that had never been around any type 1 diabetic in its life, really didn't know anything about it, and it got us talking. If this dog could do this with no training and just its own initiative, why couldn't we train a dog to do this? And that kind of kicked off a year of research in which we dove into everything dog training related, diabetes related. What could the dogs cue on? What could we teach the dogs to cue on? Then we went on and we trained one dog for this gentleman, feeling that that dog would only work for him because human scent is unique. After he was trained, he started traveling with him, and this dog began to alert on other diabetics in airports, trade shows, all kinds of venues. That led us to believe that maybe we could go ahead and train more dogs to do this for more people, and that's really how diabetic alert dogs came into being.
That's wonderful. So it really was what I guess you'd call a happy accident, or just it was a happy circumstance, really. Right.
It was paying attention to what the dog was telling us and going, maybe we could do something to help other people with this knowledge. Their noses are phenomenal. And this is only the tip of the iceberg with what these dogs can be taught to do with their nose.
So I actually heard you tell a story about how you would describe how a human smells an orange and how a dog smells an orange. Can you tell us?
Yes. Okay. Actually, I've changed it up. I now use clam chowder.
Okay.
So when you and I smell a delicious bowl of clam chowder, we go, that just smells so good. When a dog smells it, they break it down into all the singular components. They smell clams, salt, pepper, cream, anything else that's added, and they make that connection between all of those elements, and to them, that is clam chowder.
That's good. Remember, the orange was you smell the last 5 people, the farmer, the soil.
Yeah, the whole bit, yeah. Smell the dirt, the fertilizer. You and I smell an orange and we go, an orange. The dog smells the orange and it smells the last 5 people that touched it, the fertilizer, the dirt it was grown in, the water it was used, all of that.
As I understand, they can smell at quite a distance or for quite a while. Is that right?
It all depends on how the air is moving. So the scent is going to move with the air. So if the scent is blowing at the dog, we've had dogs alert on the sides of soccer fields with their kids running back and forth. And they can smell the child from yards away and alert. We've had children that actually are in swimming. They're in the pool swimming laps, and the dog is up in the bleachers, and the dog can alert from up there because the scent rises off the water and the dog can smell it.
I also recall that from EAC, a story where one handler was working down the hall and the dog was alerting at the workstation, and a coworker had to go get the handler because the dog was letting her know that something's going on.
Yes, it is amazing. And people do get quite involved deeply in using the computer at work and often will ignore the dog's alert. And our dogs are taught to not stop alerting. So they're taught to go seek other help, which this dog did. It went down the hall and got a hold of somebody else. And it's really amazing to see the dogs do that. We also have had a client who was up on a ladder painting close to the roof line, and the dog was on the ground and her blood sugar was dropping, and the dog couldn't figure out how to get up to her to alert. So the dog ran into the house and grabbed her test kit and brought it out and dropped it on the ground, which got her attention. She came down off the ladder, and sure enough, her blood sugar was dropping.
That's incredible what these dogs do. So now, of course, there's service dogs, and before we get too far afield on all these awesome things they do, we need to tell people what a service dog is and what a therapy dog is and what somebody's pet is or emotional dog. There's a difference, right?
Yes, there is. Service dogs, their role is to specifically mitigate a physical disability. So they have to be helping that individual deal with a disability that they have. A therapy dog is usually given access to places like skilled nursing homes or retirement homes, and their job is usually just to go in and visit with people and make them feel good. And last but not least, we have emotional support animals, ESAs. And while they have some access rights under housing, they don't have access rights to go into public like the service dogs do. So the only thing that an emotional support animal is there to do is to make their person feel better in whatever situation it is. They're not actually assisting with a disability. And that's the major difference between an ESA and a service dog.
Awesome, because people get confused and then they interchange them. They're not really interchangeable because the service dog has full access to buildings where the therapy dog or emotional support dog does not.
That is correct.
I use the term handler, which might confuse people. So that actually is the person who needs or has the dog and has a task or a service provided by the dog. That's called the handler, right?
It can be a handler. We refer to them as clients. Those two are used interchangeably, but the person at the end of the leash is usually the handler, yes.
So you're dealing with training a dog, and you have to train people too. So the handler has to be trained. So what are some of the things that you wish a handler would know before they got their service dog or before they came in and started the process?
We do our best to try to educate our clients as they go through the application process. One of the things we kind of joke about is you're about to lose your left hand because it's always going to have a leash in it. So for the next week, walk around not using your left hand and see how you fare, because you'll be holding a leash for the next 10 years or so. That, and it's a lot like having a toddler attached to you all the time. Every time you leave the house, you have to think about, where am I going? How long will I be there? What do I need for supplies for myself as a diabetic, as well as what supplies do I need for the dog? And you also have to be willing, if the dog is uncomfortable for any reason, you have to be willing to leave whatever you're doing to make sure that the dog's comfort is okay.
So I think it really is all about the dogs, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We're just the handlers.
People often ask, well, can my dog be a service dog? So there are some breeds that lend themselves to it, correct?
There are. The majority of dogs that you see out there that are service dogs are generally labs and golden retrievers and the mix thereof. We call those mixes a cross. And generally those dogs seem to take best to the tasks that we need them to do. So they have a good work ethic. They're willing to repeat the same thing over and over and over again, because sometimes with alerting for a blood sugar, it can take a length of time before that blood sugar becomes back into range. So we have to have the dog willing to alert, and stop when the blood sugar is good. So people have used many different types of dogs for this, but generally we keep coming back to the labs because they really have the temperament and the work ethic. I've trained a couple of other dogs. I've done a Labradoodle, I've done a Poodle, I've done a Pug. And while any dog can learn the scent work, they can learn to identify the smell. They're not always motivated to tell their human about it. And that's where you can have a breakdown. But the labs, they are very forgiving, and they will try and repeat and not get discouraged. So that's why we use them.
So they just want to just do it again. Let's do it again. They just want to, it's a game to them.
Yeah. Well, there's a smell. Where's my reward to them? So they're always happy to be working. And eventually the bond with the handler becomes the primary way that the primary ideal for the dog to work with. So the longer they're together, the more alerting they get, the better their bond is, the stronger it is, the better the alerting gets over time.
Oh. So if they just have to, they literally bond. They're a team.
They are a team. I call them a dyad. It's a team.
Oh, dyad. All right. So what are some of the biggest challenges that a handler will have with their service dog, and what are there common misconceptions that play into that?
Well, specifically speaking to the diabetic alert dogs, one of the biggest issues we have is when a person starts to experience a low blood sugar episode, the brain understands what's going on in the body and will divert a lot of what's going on to try to deal with that. One of the first things that we see happen is we see a cognitive ability drop. So the person might start to be slow in responding to you, or they might have a questionable look on their face when they're talking to you. And that's generally the first things we see, but that can always be the thing that they don't catch those first alerts from the dog either, because their cognitive ability isn't fully functioning. So even though the dog comes up and lays a paw on them, it may not register in their mind that, oh, the dog's alerting me. So all of our dogs are taught to continue to alert until that person rewards them. So if a paw on the leg doesn't work, they will literally climb up into their lap and look them in the eye. Like, are you paying attention? I'm trying to tell you something here, and you need to stop what you're doing and take care of it. And that's kind of interesting to watch, because we had a class last week and we were out at lunch and we were all talking and laughing and having a great time. And lo and behold, here comes one of the dogs from under the table, up into the side of the lap, the head over the shoulder. And we all just kind of looked at Matt and laughed and said, guess you better check your blood sugar, huh?
So I remember hearing one story where there was a client that was on a flight, and there was some blood sugar issues going on. The dog starts to alert. Client doesn't respond. The dog went and found a flight attendant, as I recall.
Correct. They were flying over the Atlantic Ocean from Spain back to New York. He had dozed off because it was quite a long flight. When the dog tried to rouse him and he wasn't responsive, he didn't acknowledge the dog and reward the dog. The dog went and found the flight attendant, brought her back, at which point she realized that he was not where he should be, and they took the correct medical procedures to get him back in range.
That's awesome. So it is all about the dogs.
It is.
Now it's time for Questions for Canines. Submit your questions in the comments.
So, my name is Arnold Schwarzenslabber and I'm a dog. And so I got some great questions here. And they're asking me all of these fantastic questions. Like, if I had to choose between belly rubs and unlimited treats, which would I pick? Well, if the treats were unlimited protein and collagen, I'd probably opt for that. But then the belly rub is so fantastic, because after a workout, when you've been chasing cats all over the neighborhood, I mean, it's so great to get the belly rubbed. But I'm laughing because it just makes me think about how ticklish I get. Do you ever feel like the cat is plotting against you all the time? But I'm not worried because the cat is a girly man. He's got no chance of coming against me. It doesn't matter what he does. He's going down. I just have to look at him and he runs away. He's such a girly man. So there's a question here. Do you have a favorite song to howl along to? Probably Yakety Yak, Don't Talk Back. Oh! Just finished cleaning up your room. Ow! Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Oh! Get all that garbage out of sight. Oh! Oh, you ain't gonna go out Friday night. Yakety yak. Don't talk back. Don't bark back. Oh! It's so fun. It's so crazy.
This has been Questions for Canines. Remember to submit your questions in the comments. Back to you, Ron.
Thanks, John Bailey. Questions for Canines. Epic Voice Guy did it again. So, Carol, any thoughts you have as we work through some of these questions and learn more about diabetic alert dogs?
It's really important because people don't always understand type 1 diabetes. A type 1 diabetic cannot produce insulin, so they have to take insulin to be able to live. And when I first started this, I thought it seemed like a very easy equation. What you ate, how much insulin you need, should give you a good blood sugar. What I have found after 20 plus years of doing this is A plus B equals anything but a normal blood sugar. Everything can affect blood sugar. Emotions, drugs, chemicals, smoke in the air, can exercise, and each diabetic reacts differently to it. When I'm talking to a diabetic, I'll ask them, when you exercise, after you exercise, does your blood sugar go up or go down? Some will say it doesn't while I'm exercising. Others will say it happens 2 hours after I exercise. So even though there's a lot of common traits, they're very individual to each person. And that's why having a dog specifically bonded to you and understanding you can be such an excellent partner. These dogs can catch that the blood sugar is beginning to change while the person is still in a healthy range. So the person can look and say, oh, I haven't eaten in 3 hours, I'm starting to drop, I'll take a little snack and then I'll be okay until lunch. Or they can, or they eat lunch and they have a big blood sugar spike afterwards, and the dog will be there by their side for the next couple of hours while that blood sugar comes down into range.
It's just incredible what the dogs can do. It's a matter we have to learn how to read the dog, because the dog they problem solve. They're going to sort it out. We just have to pay attention.
They're excellent problem solvers. We teach them to think outside the box. It's not one movement and then you stop. If A doesn't get it, you go to B, you go to C, you keep going, you find somebody else. Tell anybody in the room if you have to that your person needs help.
So speaking of training then, so it's a 2-year process, right? You've got the basic puppy stuff, dog stuff, and then you've got the actual diabetic alert dog portion, correct?
Yeah. Generally speaking, the first year is all about socialization and getting them out into the human world. A service dog really can't be expected to function fully in the human world unless it's introduced to that in the first year. So our puppies as young as 8 weeks old are getting out there and they're going into stores just to get the experience of the smells and the door swishing. And they're also learning basic cues, sit, down, come, all those kind of cues that they'll use later on. We generally don't start doing the scent training until they're about 18 months old. Then we know that they'll be a good service dog candidate. We can go ahead and go into the scent training. Scent training takes us roughly about 6 months. And then we like to place the dog by the time it's about 2 years old.
Any favorite stories about training?
I'm just trying to think of our last week here in class, and I already told you about the dog climbing up in the restaurant. One of the things we always tell people is our dogs will wake up the client in the middle of the night if a blood sugar is dropping. Obviously, if you're sleeping, you can't feel that happening. So it's very critical that the dog wake you up in the middle of the night. And generally speaking, we say that's one of the last things to happen, being woken up by the dog. It usually takes a couple of months of bonding before the dog can actually wake up out of a sleep and do its job. And this last class I had last week, all 4 dogs were waking up their partners in the first 3 days they were here. So they do think outside the box. They're problem solvers. That's what they love to do. That's another reason we use labs.
What's your favorite part of the job?
Being there when the dog alerts the person for the first time and they realize that the dog is correct and they go, this is going to change my life. It really does change the way they a lot of times manage their disease. One of our mantras here is trust the dog. If my dog alerts you, I don't care what technology is telling you, your blood sugar is going to change within a pretty short period of time. There's wonderful devices out there, the continuous glucose monitors. There's a lot of pumps that'll deliver insulin automatically now. But our dogs are still faster than all of them because they are actually testing the fluid under the skin as opposed to actually what's really time happening in the body. And our dogs are able to do it in real time. They can give the person a sniff and go, yep, there it is. Your blood sugar's changing. You need to watch it and figure out which way it's going and take appropriate action.
So you also not only have adults with service dogs, you also provide service dogs for children, correct?
Correct. We're one of the few agencies that will actually place dogs with younger kids. One of the things when I first started this, we followed what most other service dog schools do, and that's place dogs with adults. But during that time frame, I kept running into these moms of diabetic children who said that they hadn't slept through the night in years. They get up every 2 hours to make sure that the child is okay and that they will be able to wake up in the morning. And I know this really struck with me because as a mom, I have 3 kids. I remember those early first 6 weeks in the sleep deprivation, and I'm just not a good person when I don't get my sleep, and I don't think anybody is. Yeah. And I could relate to them. And here I am whining that it's a couple of months out of my kids' lives when they're doing it for 10 years. And we really felt that a dog would be able to help these parents. I mean, you're still going to have to get up when the dog wakes you up, but at least it's not every 2 hours. And that's why one of our core values here is that we will place with children. And we will also place dogs in home with multiple diabetics. One placement we made, we had 3 kids under the age of 10 that were all type 1, and the dad was a type 1. And this, we always say this was our hardest working dog ever because he had 4 diabetics that he watched over daily and nightly. And he's now living in retirement, but he's still alerting.
So did he run a circuit? He'd go from bedroom to bedroom, or? What
we ended up doing is we had him sleep in the hallway. And then everybody had to leave their door open so that he'd had access to go in and check on him. If he began to smell the change, he'd get up and he'd check each kid and go in, check the dad, and whoever it was would get the paw.
It's amazing. It's so cool. There's so many things you do at EAC. So also, there's 2 other things that are new. In the last couple of years, there's the dogs that actually do the COVID screening, and that's another component that's come on. And where is that right now?
Right now, we're kind of on a pause on that. Early, probably about June of 2021, the California Department of Public Health approached me and asked if I thought I could train a dog that could pick up COVID. So we entered into a project with them, and we were successful. The dogs were very, very good. We went out and we began screening students in schools. We would have them line up on the blacktop. The dog would walk along and he would indicate if he smelled COVID. And in those days, everybody was still being tested. So we would wait and we would have all the tests come up. And sure enough, we found out that the dogs were better than the tests. So we began working on them. We went into, once the schools were back into the swing and they didn't need us anymore really to check for COVID, we started working in the skilled nursing facilities, which we did up until this May. Uh-huh. They are constantly having outbreaks of anything infectious. It's just the nature of people living together in a community like that. And what our dogs could do is we would take them into the facility. They'd go into the person's room. They would sniff at their feet or their ankles. They would indicate to their handler if COVID was present or not. And again, the dogs were able to pick it up early. They could get the person into quarantine so it didn't affect as many other patients in those facilities. And we just wrapped up that contract because we felt, well, most of the money for COVID is now gone. So there was no more funding for it. So we're just now pivoting, trying to decide where we're going next. We're looking into some grants and some funding. But lo and behold, in case you haven't heard, we're in the middle of a huge COVID outbreak. And I've had a few phone calls of people that wanted us and our dogs ready to go, but until I get funding, I can't do that.
So this isn't bird flu, this is actually COVID then?
This is actually COVID, and we started to try to do flu A and B last year, but there wasn't a big outbreak, so I was not able to get the samples that I needed to be able to do that. But they just caught, I had an employee last week that the dog caught and nailed. She was asymptomatic, didn't feel like she was sick. And she could tell by the way the dog was alerting on her that she better take a test. And sure enough, that test came up positive and she was out for a week. So they're really, really good at it.
Yeah, they're working. So speaking of that, now people, I'm sure would want to know how you train a dog to go after a specific scent. And as I recall, right, there's a scent wheel you use. So it's a process of like hide and seek, right?
It is. The first question whenever we start a new scent, like with COVID, was how are we going to collect a sample? How do I know that I have a good sample to train the dogs on? With COVID, we ended up taking sock samples from positive COVID people. So anybody that tested positive that would wear a pair of socks for us for 30 minutes, we would take that sock and we would go ahead and train the dogs on it. We use a 12-arm scent wheel So you can imagine 12 spokes sticking out from the middle that have stainless steel cups on them with holes in the top. And what we do is we put a sample in there, what we would call a hot sample, so a COVID positive sample or a diabetic low sample. And we go ahead and put it in there, and then we have the dog walk all the way around the wheel and check all 12 spokes, and it'll alert to us where the positive is. Once the dog does that in about 500 double blinds, we consider them trained, and then they begin to work on the people. And in the COVID dogs case, they would go out to the schools or the skilled nursing facilities. With the DADs, they wait and they're teamed up with their handler at that point and begin to work for them.
That's awesome. So that is it's a multi-phase program they go through, but it's just amazing. I'm still amazed at what they do and how they do it. So
well, their noses, so much of their brain is dedicated to their sense of smell, where yours and ours isn't. It's for them, this is how they smell the world. I mean, these dogs have always known that diabetics smell that way. What we did is put a purpose on it. When you smell this, you get a reward, so you need to tell me. And that's really where it's changed. And we're just on the tip of the iceberg of what these dogs can do. Their noses are phenomenal. It's all about thinking outside the box for how we can purpose their wonderful sense of smell.
Another thing you're doing is a breeding program.
Yes, actually more of a puppy raising program. We haven't gotten into the breeding end of it because we have to have the puppies, raise the puppies, and then we can go into breeding. We just have 6 puppies that have just reached their first birthday. It looks like most of those will go on to work in the DAD world. We hope to have all of them placed by first quarter of next year. We have 2 more puppies landing in the next week. Thelma and Louise will be joining us, and they are 10 weeks old. And I can't wait to hold them and smell puppy breath.
Oh, it's fun. All right. So as we wrap up here, are there any resources or organizations you'd recommend for people interested in learning more about service dogs?
One of the key ones I usually recommend is Assistance Dogs International. It's a coalition of schools like ours that come together to set standards to make sure that we're putting a good quality product out there. Not just a dog that doesn't have manners and isn't doing the job it's presented to do, things like that. One of our biggest problems in this area is fake service dogs. People representing that their service dog is a legit service dog and then it doesn't behave well. We've even had our dogs lunged after and almost attacked by these fake service dogs. It's a real problem for the whole industry.
So that's a whole another show.
Yeah, sorry.
So what are the future goals for, I think you just told us, the future goals for EAC?
We're definitely ramping up. Right now we place about 10 dogs a year. We'd like to see that majorly increase. We just recently opened our applications nationwide, so anyone within the U.S. can apply for a dog from us now. We hope to increase our production. We're also looking at what else we can do in the medical detection field that will help individuals.
Well, thank you, Carol, very much for joining us. And listeners, we just love you being here and glad you're able to learn more about diabetic alert dogs. So Epic Voice Guy, John Bailey, take it away.
Thanks for listening and for subscribing to this Paws for You podcast. Visit our website, tpfypod.com. We are currently accepting submissions for additional sponsors so they can pay me with more than just dog biscuits. That could be you. This is Epic Voice Guy John Bailey saying, until next time, ruff, ruff, bow, wow, sniff, sniff.